All right, let's start. Welcome to the eKidz presentation. If you attended my previous presentation, I gave you some background already, like what everything led to eKidz and my work with eKidz. I want to introduce myself first, which I usually don't really like doing so much, but I think it's really important for you to understand also where I come from. And so first thing I have to say is I'm an educator at heart, through and through. To give you some background, I'm a Bavarian elementary school teacher that ventured out right after his student teaching. I worked as a DAF teacher, DUTS teacher, and EFL teacher. Mainly, I've been working as a German or English immersion teacher, though, in totally different programs, either dual or full immersion, elementary and also secondary school. I've worked in private and public schools. I shared curricula with other teachers, or I had my own curriculum, or I had no curriculum at all. As it was mentioned before, the textbook is your curriculum, and sometimes I didn't have a textbook. I worked with heritage speakers and novice speakers. I worked in Rosenheim for only a short time. Out of Rosenheim, I have been working in Istanbul, in Nicaragua, in Honduras, in Mexico, Brazil. And for the past 16 years, I have been in the USA. Many years I have been in a first grade classroom, and for the past decade, I have been the immersion facilitator. But still, I'm subbing in and out for teachers on long-term leave, mainly in the German program. Currently, I'm an English teacher in the Japanese program. But I'm an immersion teacher really through and through. But I'm also a researcher. My facilitator job required me to dive deep into the sea of data, often more than I actually wanted. The school has always been at the forefront of implementing new ideas and also research. Sometimes universities in Germany and Japan used our environment for their research. Sometimes we had to do it on our own. For instance, when the state legislature confronted us with a very well-intended law that pulled the whole immersion program into turmoil, I was forced to create a research-based translation of a commercial level reading test in German and in French, whereas I don't speak any French. DeepL is really great. In the aftermath, I had to analyze thousands of data points. I had to recalculate benchmarks and share all that with the district and the state. So involuntarily, I became a researcher and more of a reading specialist, which led actually to the point that I wrote my dissertation about early reading and text readability. So I would call myself probably like a critical research teacher at heart, the emphasis still on teacher. And here's exactly where I got in contact with eKidz. Our school had just bought a subscription, and I was calling Natasha Tetruyeva, who is the CEO of the company, just to talk about the setup of the accounts. And in this very first phone conference, we figured out that both of us were actually working on the same ideas. Our school more from the instructional perspective, and she from the product development perspective. And it's not really often that you find a fit like that. You know, like very often there's a little bit of a rubbing and not fitting very well if you are exposed to a new product, but with eKidz it just really felt very natural. So I visited Natasha in her office in Munich, and we talked for hours. We were matching up our knowledge and our visions, and eKidz is just a startup with the goal in mind that was important to us too, to help the children become independent readers while they were developing their language skills. So, and what I want to present to you today is the following. In this presentation, I first want to explore what is out there on the German book market for beginning readers and how we can use that effectively in an immersion classroom. And then I want to dive into eKidz and present eKidz. What does eKidz have that goes beyond the material that is currently available in the regular bookshops? And in the last part, I will give you a product demonstration, and that will be very interactive. You can ask me to show you stuff, and I will do my best to follow your needs and to present the product to you. So let's start. In my last presentation, I showed this image of a regular bookshop in Germany. I took this picture on my mission to find out what early reading material is actually available in bookshops. So I went to about a dozen bookshops in Munich and Augsburg, where I live when I'm back in Germany. I was somewhat baffled. First of all, there were just 3 categories: Erstleser, which ranges from 0 to 8, a very broad range, 8 to 10 years, and 10 to 12 years. My first thought was, well, that doesn't really help me with my dissertation on text readability and leveling. So I had a closer look, especially in the beginning reading section, and it wasn't so much what I did find there, it was more the 2 things I did not find so much there, which actually was confirmed later on in a conversation with publishers. First of all, there is really a lack of scientific self-readers until about 3rd grade. So, and the second most important one for me in that moment was the lack of scaffolded books for early beginning readers, besides the feeble, the ABC reader. Actually, the next easiest books after the feeble that I found were already chapter books. I mean, well, simple chapter books, but already chapter books, which is a huge jump somehow. So I want to skip the discussion on scientific self-readers. These start essentially in the shelf for 8 to 10-year-olds only, and science books for younger children are available, but they're strictly read-aloud books to the children. So, but let's go to the early readers. Which systems did I find that would help beginning readers to become independent readers? Well, there are some books, they're called Mitlesebücher. They're intended to motivate children to read, supported by their parents, their aunties, or whoever wants to read with the children. These books are mainly read to the children. The children read the highlighted keywords, but unfortunately, these keywords are sometimes quite difficult to decode for beginning readers. The text is not authentic, but the word is authentic. I remember having seen that in a bookshop. Peter zieht seine Schlittschuhe an und saust los. So ein Quatsch, sagt er. So these books have their value in developing the concept of word boundaries in written text. They also stimulate children to guess words from context clues. And in general, they're a good approach to stir curiosity in reading or to take away that heavy burden of decoding before starting to really enjoy literature. They're just like a leeway into literature, interest and love in books. They will also help with identifying and learning new vocabulary, but since they require one-on-one attention, they are not really feasible for instructional purposes, at least not in many places. So from an instructional point of view, it would make more sense to have the children read the small repetitive words, the high frequency words. Well, actually, these types of books also exist. You all know the books where all the nouns are substituted by picture icons. Ever seen anything like that? So some publishers have actually specialized on them. Unfortunately, our immersion students wouldn't know the majority of the words that are represented by the pictures. So, for instance, der kleine Pirat, they might know that. Rang verzweifelt die Hände, eine riesige Welle überspülte das Boot, schon brach der Mast, schon zerriss das Segel. So many of the words they probably wouldn't know. You might also notice that some of the so-called decipherable words, like everything around the nouns, they are quite complicated to read, like verzweifelt, überspülte, riesige, and so on. So whereas the picture nouns would be easy to read, at least in this sample, look at that here, Pirat, Mast, Segel, Welle, these are certainly easier words. And the massive picture scaffolding, so the massive picture scaffolding will help with the comprehension. But to have a positive effect on vocabulary, you would have to train the children really to use the attached picture legends systematically, which are typically at the end of the book. So they always have to skip back. And then it's really very useful to have these books. The task would be then to reference back to the legend until the child really has securely memorized a certain word. And this way they would work independently, and build up the vocabulary at the same time. If you use this type of picture books in this way, that can be really a great contributor to building non-academic vocabulary. So the last category of books that I want to mention that help beginning readers are the syllabic readers. And I want to draw your attention to one of the features of that. So in those readers, every single syllable is color-coded in alternating colors. So that is surely a decoding help, but it doesn't necessarily aid the comprehension. I'm going to give you an example. For instance, there's a word gelesen. Think about gelesen. None of the syllables make any sense. Gelesen. It reads almost like Turkish, which helesen means especially you. So if you're a Turkish reader, you probably might relate to that word first. If the color coding would switch around a little bit, not according to syllables, but according to morphological structures, like this here, it would be a true help, not only in decoding, still there, but also in disclosing the meaning of a word. Because now the word root is clear. Les, with les, they have a clearer clue what the word's all about. So let's have a look at this whole example of a text. Notice that more than half of the words are still monosyllabic and many are still long, like rutscht, for instance, which is a horrible word to read. Also, some words get misguiding meaning clues, like nun in the very last word. It becomes a central part of the last word, whereas it should be divided into hin and unter to really make sense to a reader who needs to understand the word. So my recommendation is to mark only the word roots if you're using that type of strategy to help your kids with the first decoding skills. It would look like that. So the word roots are clearly marked for meaning. The affixations are also very distinct and visible still. For instance, in rutscht, so we have rutsch as the still very long base word, but the affixation is very clear. So these are the essentially the scaffolding systems available in the German book market. They're really good ideas, I think. They're very supportive. They might be a great help for native speakers, but they have the limitations for German immersion students. So they just really tend to be a little bit less effective, especially if it comes to making meaning of the text. So now allow me one last comment on the beginning reader section in the book shop. In my first year in the USA, when I had just started as a first grade teacher, I had a child in my class who had just started reading her second Harry Potter book. I mean, the second book. She had read that already, and in kindergarten, essentially. So in front of what bookshelf would you place that poor girl? And we cover really a very wide variety of readers and any combinations of reading proficiency levels and language proficiency levels. In the last presentation, I pointed out the following 3 challenges for reading beginners in a foreign language program. Language is an additional hurdle, number 1, because they just don't have the vocabulary yet to relate the text and themselves. The second, the students cannot easily use anticipatory strategies or context clues to support the decoding of even base words because they just don't have the structural knowledge. They wouldn't know if it's ich hat or ich habe. And third, reading is at first a strictly one-dimensional decoding process, starting with every single letter in a word and hopefully ending with meaning after having blended all these sounds together. So what our readers in German immersion programs really need is this. They need picture support that clearly shows the ongoing in the story to make a connection between the visual and the text, so that children can identify the unknown words through text context and the picture. The second, reading support to decipher the text and give children the opportunity to have the reading corrected or modeled. So some sort of a scaffolding. And the last thing is they need leveled texts that are easy enough to be fully disclosed by readers with limited reading skills and limited language skills. So I just want to interject here, where does this lack of leveled books in Germany really come from? Well, Germany does not even have a leveling system in the first place. There is no German Lexile. There is no German version of Fontes Pinel. Some publishers developed something like an ABC level system, but really with very few books available and only very few levels available. It just doesn't really go much beyond that. There is just no formal index system for beginning readers. There's simply a lack of knowledge or even an awareness that text leveling is really a very valuable strategy. Yet, as we know from English literacy instruction, leveled reading is extremely effective to help children become self-directed and independent readers. And we really want to transfer that insight and that knowledge and that experience from the English literacy classes also into the German classrooms, as we are here in the United States and as we have to follow US curriculum to a certain extent. Well, here is exactly where eKidz comes in. First and foremost, eKidz is a leveled reading system that is based on Vygotsky's theories that are really widely recognized in US pedagogy. Vygotsky suggested that the greatest learning success is granted if we carefully scaffold so that children can explore independently, slightly above their actual learning capacity. So Vygotsky coined this as the zone of proximal development. That is all that area like in those red boxes there. eKidz creates a continuum of zones of proximal development that a beginning reader can work through. So far, eKidz provides 9 reading levels, and 3 more are soon to come. But really, if you have a close look, the first 2 reading levels are actually even still subdivided with multiple texts, slightly building on difficulty. The texts are easy enough that the child can just about decipher the text while also grasping the meaning. The child improves with continued independent practice on one level until the skill level has solidified. The reading challenge gradually increases just marginally to always stay just slightly above the child's actual reading level. In all this hard reading work, the text decoding and making meaning should be in a challenge balance. If you remember Bennett's task challenge graphic from the previous presentation, we have to avoid to overwhelm or underwhelm children as they're reading. If that were the case, we push a child out of the zone of proximal development and set it up for the failure. So essentially, always the text and the content and the reading difficulty, they all have to be in a manageable balance for the children. So Vygotsky mentions that scaffolding is necessary to enable children work independently on a slightly elevated level. So which scaffolding is eKidz offering? First of all, pictures. Pictures are not only decorative and motivating, but for immersion students, they are essential scaffolds for making meaning. They just grasp to them to really understand the text. Since language knowledge is still absent for novice speakers, pictures are the only aid to make a connection between a new word and its meaning. An additional feature, which you don't see right here, which I'm going to be demonstrating later on, most of eKidz pictures are also animated, so they're not only showing the objects, but they also show the actions where necessary. The second one is patterns on lower texts. The texts on the lowest levels are built on recurring structures, so children are exposed multiple times to the same structure. This serves 3 purposes. It helps with decoding, and text anticipation. But for language learners, it also helps to learn and practice the grammatical structures through repetitive memorization. And it certainly also helps to counteract error fossilization as the other side of the same coin. eKidz also has a read aloud option, and that is actually a new feature, which is great. So eKidz provides a model or kind of a mentor reader. Our reader reads the text aloud to the child while the read word is highlighted like in a karaoke machine. It is slow enough for the child to follow the text. It is yet fluently read somehow so that the context is still visible. So it's not, doesn't really end with just a decoding exercise. The next feature that I want to mention is to be published very soon, and as I've heard, like probably within the very next few weeks, if not even next week already. This is a recording function. This is brand new. So the child can hear him or herself read, or the parents or the teachers get the opportunity to listen what the child has read asynchronously, which is obviously very important in a current teaching environment. I want to present another feature that is not yet available, but what the company is currently working on, also pointing out they're not really satisfied with the product it is, but this is a work in process and it just becomes better and better every time that you look into it. Directed in the future, eKidz is working on an artificial intelligence voice recognition function, and they're working together with a university in Croatia, as they're working with different universities, also with the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany together. So this will provide children with an immediate feedback also on the quality of their reading once that is available. So for each text, last feature that is also already available, there is a comprehension question part that guides the child back into the text and provides immediate feedback on the text understanding. So all of these scaffolding features are really unique, but probably the best part is that you can turn them off. So it sounds weird, but actually this is pure Vygotskianism. Vygotsky suggests that scaffold need to be built to enable higher proficiency learning explorations first. But as the child continues to practice and operate on that higher level, these scaffolds need to be taken away again. Only then children can internalize skills and apply their knowledge independently. So once they have reached the next level, as has been shown in a graphic, you add the next level, you build up the scaffolding, which is green, which could be any of the features that I've just explained to you on eKidz, and then one by one you have to take them away again. So think about the opportunities that you have by taking away the scaffolding. First of all, you can turn off the picture and have the children illustrate the book. This is a fabulous activity, and I want to explain to you what our school, we had a beautiful opportunity once through the French government for the French department. So we had a French author coming to our school, and it was just her concept. She had written the book. It was all about fantasy, and it was great. And the children had to illustrate the books. So the results were actually exhibited in several libraries in town, and one even in the central library. Besides that, from a teacher perspective and accountability perspective, that would be actually a comprehension assessment, and I don't want to mention that too loud, not to take the fun out of that activity for the children. The second, if you turn the text off and just show the picture, the children can write to the pictures. You would have the mentor text from when you first presented the story, so it's all there. But then the children can add details or dialogues or whatever might be the current objective in the literacy class. Besides, that would be a writing assessment, which I also don't really want to mention, but it's really an appropriate tool for the classroom. That's all that I want to say by saying that. So the third one is you can have only the text read aloud, but the text is turned off. And in combination with the comprehension questions at the end, you also have a listening task, which would be really great for your comprehension assessment of your students and gauging their proficiency levels. Then the last one, if you also keep the text turned off and with the recording feature, the children would be able to retell the stories and to use the language actively that they have learned through reading before or just invented like freely from the very beginning. This is a perfect speaking assessment. And with all of these variations, actually, you have covered all language domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. All that is covered. I want to point out another notable quality. The stories are all written by German authors. So they are not just monocultural translations, as happens so often with books in German, but they actually convey truly German cultural aspects. Not only do the text reference German locations, like in the text about a surfing wave that is located in the heart of Munich, if you have been at the Isar, so that's where it is. But eKidz also picks up stories and traditions that are considered inherent to German culture. For instance, already on level 2, Grimm's classic Fischer und seine Frau is presented as a paper cutting animation story. This is a tradition dating back to the 16th century. I just find it amazing, really. Besides the narrative stories and fairy tales, there are also biographies and scientific texts available. The stories are evenly available to build a whole class, a whole lesson class around that, but they are also appropriate for individual instruction or for small groups. You can certainly have children work in pairs or groups and create readers' theaters. You can have them write quiz questions about science texts. They can write summaries. They compare the text to other stories. They're rewriting the stories in a different context. They're expanding the text. They're comparing digital text with non-digital text, with print text. They can find additional facts on a science topic and just add to it. They just write a sequel to the story. Everything is set up there already. By assigning these types of activities, you not only take away all of Vygotskian scaffolding, you're actually building the rigor of instruction according to Bloom's taxonomy and have the children reach higher in their language skills and their reading skills. Best of all, you can assign the same type of a generalized task, like an objective, the main goal, the main idea of the lesson, to children that are reading different texts. And they can be working on different levels on the same task and on the same objective, but with a different text and a different level of difficulty. So here is where teaching really becomes individualized. So it's not just the reading practice individualized, but really the whole teaching approach in the German immersion instruction becomes individualized. There's just no comparable product out in the market that incorporates all of these aspects of literacy instruction and language instruction, especially for German immersion students. I will now launch a short presentation and show some of the stories, but also the administrative features for the teachers. First of all, eKidz was created for Droid and Apple devices, but it also can be pulled through BlueStacks on Microsoft and Linux devices. So again, here are the different levels: level 1, 2, 3, 7, 9, and so on. These are all the books that are available here. And again, this is how a student would see that's displayed. I want to start with the first level, the second book, and I want to point out in this book also the animated graphics and the reading function, the read aloud function. Here we go.
Obst und Farben. Der Apfel ist rot. Die Birne ist gelb. Die Kiwi ist grün. Die Mango ist orange.
Okay, and so on and so on. I actually just want to go back to that one and also show you the test that goes with it. It's just 5 questions. This is how it would look like. So the question would be, welche Farbe hat der Apfel? So there's a right there question. Let's say I'm a bad reader and I put, I don't know, so I just highlight all 3 of them. You can actually do that, but it will show later on that the question was not properly answered. The second question might be easier. So I go to the second question. Die Nuss ist braun. Well, this is my name, so I'm an expert on that. So braun is the right answer. And the next one, was ist orange? Eine Kiwi, I'm not so sure. So let's just mess this one up really. Apfel, Birne und Traube sind Obst. Yeah, I've heard that, sure. Gelb, Grün und Blau sind Farben. So these are questions at already higher level. That is just not right their questions. So these are require the child to be able to categorize. So, and here I get my result. Well, poor you, du schaffst es. So let's go back to another text. I want to show you, which is one of my many favorite texts, but this one is surely Der Fischer und seine Frau. And here I also want to show you the recorded.
Der Fischer und seine Frau. So einen Fisch hat Fischer Hansen noch nie gefangen. Es ist ein besonders dicker Fisch. Er hat Schuppen aus purem Gold. Der Fisch glänzt in der Sonne. Bitte lass mich leben, fleht der Fisch. Ich bin ein verzauberter Prinz. Wirf mich zurück in das Wasser. Der Fisch hat Angst. Er zappelt.
Okay. Now I want you
Fischer Hansen überlegt.
Now I want to show you the features to turn off here, either the text only or, and you can combine that also with the reading out function or just the picture. And if you hold the button up here, it turns red, and with that the whole text from the beginning to end will be read like a storyboard without any text at all. And this is how you would make it a listening task. So
Fischer Hansen überlegt. Der goldene Fisch sieht.
And so on. So this is how that one works. I want to show you also, just so that you get like a grasp of the different reading levels and how they are different, how they are accessible to the students' proficiency levels. My probably ever favorite story, because it's just really funny, is Das Abendessen. But I'm going to be reading out that to you. One feature down here, you see all the pages. So these are actually quite long stories. And as the children read through the stories, they cannot quickly click through them. They need to dwell for a certain amount of time on the page so that they can actually make it to the test at the end. If they haven't read properly, the quiz would not open for them. So I'll read that one to you. Hier ist die eKidz Familie. Englisch. Heute Abend backt Papa Pfannkuchen. Er backt die besten Pfannkuchen. Er wirft sie mit der Pfanne hoch. And see the animations? Look at the next one. Dann fängt er sie mit der Pfanne wieder. Das mag Mama gar nicht. Die Pfannkuchen können auf den Boden fallen. Aber heute Abend ist Mama nicht da. Sie macht Yoga. Papa backt sehr viele Pfannkuchen. Bald stapeln sich die Pfannkuchen auf dem Teller. Da kommt Mama heim. Sie rennt in die Küche. Die Pfannkuchen sind fertig. Papa bringt sie gerade zum Tisch. Mama und Papa stoßen zusammen. Die Pfannkuchen fallen alle auf den Boden. Aber beim Wenden ist kein Pfannkuchen runtergefallen, sagt Papa. Alle lachen und heben die Pfannkuchen auf. Okay. Let's quickly go through that test also. So he uses eine Pfanne. Der Papa backt die Pfannkuchen. Wie wendet Papa die Pfannkuchen? Er wirft sie hoch. Was passiert Mama? Sie kommt zu spät. Nein, sie stößt mit Papa zusammen. Das ist richtig. Und das Letzte, die Pfannkuchen liegen auf dem Boden und alle heben sie wieder auf. So. And this time I made it right. Thank you for the applause. I want to give you another example, which is also very interesting, which I haven't mentioned at all yet. So I'll give you this story. This is the very first story. Transport. Ich fahre Roller. Ich fahre Fahrrad. Ich fahre Mofa. Ich fahre im Auto. You can say ich fahre Auto. They don't have driver's license at that age yet. Ich fahre im Bus, and so on. Okay. Now I'm getting out of this text and I want to show you something. Maybe you've noticed up here it says Deutsch. You can switch to English also, or to Spanish. And that is like super important for ESL students. With that, you're also providing reading material for ESL students, and even for at least most of our students that are not native English speakers would probably be Spanish speakers, at least at my school, that is. We are up to 25% now, I think. So that is a wonderful resource for them. That they don't have to learn. It's the same resource, and they still can read the same the books. What I really want to point out, and that's what I'm interested as a researcher, here's the same story in English on the go. And I just want to point out how it's not just a simple translation, but how the authors really made an effort, even taking the same story, but making it readable. And reading, as I'd mentioned before, works in completely different ways in English than it does in German. So here it says on the go. We don't have the pattern text here, but it's all sight words. Look at me go. All of these words are initial sight words. I can spin. Spin is probably not a sight word, but legible through the visual support. And then I have fun. So we don't have those same patterns as they're very important for our German readers. Just pointing out really how much effort the authors put into that product to make it really adjustable to the beginning readers, even in different languages. I want to switch over to another feature that is here, those three bars. That is the administration, Verwalten. You could switch the language also to English if you want to. I have it in English, in German. And on the front page of this one here, left-hand side, you see all the different classes that are set up. I'm going to pull up my class. I only have 2 students in there. My students are Peter der Große and Charlemagne. There's only one teacher attached to this group. I could attach other teachers if you're co-teaching. You could just pull them over with double clicks, or pull over from the student body and add different students if you want to add them to a certain group. Okay. So you can create new groups also. Let's try that first. That's the easiest way. You just give it a name. Let's say Wurst. Let's call it Wurst. And the English language, we want to keep it in German also. If I start this group, you can set up the whole class all at once. You could name all of the students now Wurst 1 and 2, and so it's not very common. Okay, and then you just add how many boys and how many girls you have in the class, and automatically it will generate the names for whole the class, which would be Wurst 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. That is very important in times nowadays where data protection and student information, hacking, all these things become prominent topics. So this way you can keep anonymity for all of the students, okay? You can also add teachers or students just the same way. I'll come to that through a different pathway, actually. Let's look at my list here, at my student list. Peter der Große. Let's look how much he has accomplished reading books. I have to say both of them are really lazy readers. Oh, I double-clicked, sorry. So I put him back in. So here he is, Peter der Große. So this is what you see when you go to Peter der Große. What has he done? He has read just one day, and he hasn't done much. So these are all the icons that will show you exactly what he has done, how many questions he has read, and how many books he has read, and how many he has listened to. Really not much for him. You could switch the language here also for him. You can change his level if you think, yeah, he doesn't do much, but I know he's on a higher level. You can level him up in any of the languages, up and down. And here with these last features I mentioned before, to get to the quiz questions at the end, they must have read through the text here this way, or they must have listened to the text, or they must have read through the text. Only then the quiz questions are being triggered. So this way there's some control that they are not just clicking themselves through. And this would be the profile for him. They can enter all the information. The password is being generated automatically, and you can switch it around if you don't like it. Here's another fabulous feature. The login process can be very cumbersome sometimes with electronic devices in kindergarten, first grade. Here comes the QR code. So you can send the QR code for Peter der Große straight to the parent's email. Just copy and paste the parent's email in here, send it off, and in future, once they have set it up one time, Peter der Große can always enter his eKidz immediately without going through that very challenging process for at least kindergarten and first grade students. Okay, so this way you can look at students individually, but you can look at also at the whole class. There's a whole class overview, and as I'm saying, both of them were really very lazy. This is all that I wanted to show you at this moment. I want to close with the notion that Impact EdTech, which is a huge European organization, they recognized eKidz as one of the 15 most promising educational solutions in Europe. And that was just about a month ago. It was recently featured on the Goethe Institute website, and it was awarded also the Comenius Edu Media Siegel in 2018 for exemplary educational media. I also want to point out the highly collaborative and responsive staff that goes with that product. So they would respond to you immediately and help you any which way to make eKidz work at your school. The base price for the USA is currently listed at $10 per child for an annual school subscription, but depending on the numbers, there are deals. So the benchmarks are 50 plus, 100 plus, and 200 plus, or 51, always one above, which would lower the price by 5%. And if you attended this session today, you would get an extra 5% off until the end of the month, I think that is, if you sign up. I am your contact point in the USA to help you with any individual questions and that. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the conference. And I will see you somehow soon.